Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video I'm going to show you how to add buffering and playback controls to a video player. So this is what we're going to be building. Notice we have the hover effect. As soon as I enter the video, the controls start showing, and as I exit, they become invisible. So let's click here. We have the pause and play. If I click on play, it plays the video. We also have a time tracker here, which tracks the number of seconds and minutes the video is playing. We have a buffering indicated in white on the timeline and the play progress in blue. Next we have the playback speed here, which we only have three options to pick from: the 1x, 1.5x and 2x. And lastly, I've also added the seeking, so we can seek to certain position within the timeline by clicking. So let's click here. It takes us to this position. So notice the loading spinner here. Loading spinner just indicates that the video is being loaded, and yeah, so that's it. We have our buffering continuously being updated, and same thing with the play progress. So guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe now and let me know in the comment section what. Okay, let's get into our coding. I already created a basic code for our player. So we have here the app component that renders our player with the URL for the video's URL, and inside our player we've created a basic video start component using emotion. Now we have the player. The player expects three props to come from the parent component. Next we are just we've attached a reference to the video player here, and we're going to use this reference to perform we're going to use this reference to get the buffering state, playback state, and improve and increase the playback speed. So we're going to use this to manipulate the video component. So now that we have this, this is where we have a global styles. This one comes with create React app, and then I just created a basic theme here, very simple theme, and we're going to now get into our player component and let's start creating it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add the play and stop. We're going to add PlayPause functionality to the player, and to do that I'm going to create a state variable called isPlaying. Okay, and we're going to have a function. I'm going to call this function handle PlayPause. So this function, what this function does is it sets the player to, when the video is playing, it pauses it, and if it is paused, it plays it. So the condition for that is going to be, first of all, check that the video reference is defined. So if video ref is undefined, just end the process. Otherwise, I'm going to check if it's playing. If the video is playing, pause it. So this is how you do pause. Else. Okay, so this is our player, basic player with pause. Now let's go to that and see. So this is it here. Okay, our player plays. Now we're going to pause it. Okay, so at the moment we won't be able to pause it because by default isPlaying is false. So we need to make sure that it's switched to true when it starts playing. And to do that, we're going to use an event. We're going to use an event for play to do that and display. There are two events involved. We're going to use two events. So within our use effect, we're going to list into two events: the play event and the playing event. So first of all, let's check. I'm going to check if the video ref isn't defined. You should prevent the process from going down. Otherwise, I'm going to now create a handler on play, and this handler okay. Good. Now let's see. This is our player. Okay, so it plays, and then we can pause it by clicking. So let's now the pause works, but play doesn't work after being paused. So let's also listen for the pause event. So we can now pause and play the video. Good. Now, next thing we would want to work on is the loading state. Let's say when the video is still loading, when it's not available in the player yet. So I'm going to have a handler. I'm going to call it on waiting state because the event here is the waiting event. So it's playing as false when it's waiting, and we're going to have state for it's waiting. And just to avoid unnecessary even setting up just to avoid setting the state unnecessarily, we should only update the is playing to false if the flag is true. And when it's paused, we also need to make sure that the is waiting is set to false. Same here, do the same if statement. Same thing here. And then we're going to call at the event. Make sure that we clear that event. Good. So we now have a waiting flag, and what we need to do is to use a loader, a spinner, to indicate that it's waiting for data. So I'm just going to, since we have alignment center, justification center, and the parent box, so I'm just going to make the position an absolute, so that it will stand at the top. It will stand on top of the player. Yeah. So we have the waiting already. We won't be able to see it now since the network isn't that bad. But as soon as we integrate the timeline, we'll be able to see the spinner because we'll have to be seeking the positions. Now that we have the play pause, we have the waiting. Let's work on the timeline. Now, the next thing is the timeline. So inside the player, where we're rendering the video component for the player, I'm going to add a few more elements I'm going to add a few more elements for flex. Now this flex is just going to be container for our controls, including timeline. So the width is going to be full, height of, let's just give it 100 pixels. Okay, I'm just going to quickly copy and paste everything so that it will go faster. Okay, so this is the wrapper for our timeline. Next is our timeline itself. Okay, so we're going to have another container to wrap our timeline, and so let's add another flex box. Now this flex box is going to have flex direction of column. This is because we're going to have two components two elements within this wrapper. So we're going to have the element for the timeline and the element for the controls. So within here, this is going to be timeline. So timeline will have a flex, still a flex box, and this timeline is going to take two more elements, two more child elements. Yeah, this is going to be our, or let's say it's going to take one. So another wrapper, because this wrapper here is a flex, it's a flex column, so I'm going to have another wrapper within. So this one is going to be another wrapper within that flex column that would contain, that would hold just hold on. Okay, this is our timeline, and this is timeline's wrapper. So I'm just going to paste, I'm just going to paste the style props for this timeline wrapper. So these are the style props, and within the timeline wrapper we're going to have another wrapper like this. And this wrapper would have a position of relative, full width, and full height. Within this wrapper we would have two more elements. This is going to be our playback progress, and our buffer progress. Great. Now that we have these UIs, so this gives us the UI for our timeline. Let's see what it looks like. Nothing yet for now. Let's see. Okay, nothing yet because we have opacity here set to 0, and this is because I want to be able to have the hover effect. So in order to make sure that the opacity is set to 1 when we hover, I'm going to add that to the main wrapper of the player. So in here we're going to have the hover. So hover set the timeline's opacity to 1. So this is how you just this is how it's easily done. Now if we go back here, let's refresh the page, and as soon as we hover on it, we notice that our playback is being displayed. A timeline is being displayed. So yeah, now we have the timeline. Next part is to indicate playback progress, and the buffer progress. So what we're going to need two references for those two elements. So let's add reference for buffer, and this is a div, and another reference for progress. So I'm going to attach this reference to, this is the playback ref, and another ref for the buffer. Okay, in order to update the width of those two references, we're going to have to we're going to listen to the progress and time update events. So let's go inside, still inside the use vect. I'm going to add a function for, let's start with the progress, with the play progress. So I'm going to add a function for on time update. This is going to handle the on time update event. So what we'll do is I'm just going to check if the element I'm going to check if the progress is not defined, it should return null. Otherwise, we should get the current time. So I'm getting the current time and the duration from the element, and I'm also getting the width. Okay, yeah. So here I'm getting the progress, which is current time divided by the duration, and we're multiplying that by 100 to get the width and percentage, and then we're going to now add the event and make sure that this event is cancelled when the component is unmounted. Okay, let's play our player. Notice that we now have our play progress indicated in blue here. Next thing would be adding the buffer, incrementing the buffer state. But before that, within this, we need to always make sure that we are setting the is waiting to false. Otherwise, we would have a loading state for waiting even after it starts playing. So if is waiting is true, we're going to set is waiting to false. So next we're going to have on progress event. So we're going to listen to the on progress event, and just like we did both here up here, actually we don't need to really set the is waiting to false. So we're just going to have I'm just going to check if the element, if there is no buffer, there's no buffer time range, return null. So if the buffer, if there is no buffer, if there is no buffer on the element, just return void. And if the buffer ref is not defined as well, or if the buffer range is not defined, return void as well. Now we're getting the so this is how we're going to do this. We're going to have I'm going to get the buffer end from the element buffered, like that. And then we are going to check if buffer ref is defined and duration is greater than 0, comma, going to update the weight of the time of the buffer timeline. Okay, let's see. Nothing yet. Okay, this is not supposed to be here. Now let's see. Okay, notice our buffering is currently working. So the video buffers as it's playing. Okay, now that we have buffering and playback progress being functional, what we need to work next on is sticking to a particular position by clicking. So to do that, we're going to need to create. Now in for this one, we just need to click event on the timeline, and we're going to call the handler for that event seek position. Now this handler is going to expect click event, and we're going to pass the handler to a click on click event on the timeline. So this is our timeline, so I'm just going to add on click, and I will pass the handler. So what we need to do here is to get, there are a few parameters we're going to need from the event, the click event. So we're going to need to get the left dimension from the and the width. Great. So we're getting the distance from the left side to where we clicked, and we're going to calculate the click position as the event dot client x, which is the horizontal axis, the width of the horizontal axis, minus the left divided by the width. So this gives us the position, and next thing we'll need to do is just now we need to also make sure that this can only happen if our video element is defined. So if it's not defined, just return void. So below this portion, I'm going to also check that the click position is in between, is not greater than 1 and not smaller than 0. I'm going to have an if statement, and I'm going to say click position. So I'm checking to make sure that the click position is not above 1 or below 0. Next thing is we're going to get the duration in milliseconds by getting it from this, and we're going to get the new elapsed time in milliseconds as the duration times the click position. New converted to second will give us this, and then we're going to now update our current time with that time in second, and they should now have our clicking functioning. Now we should be able to stick to a certain position within the timeline. So notice now how our waiting state comes on as we click. Now the waiting is still loading, so it means that we are not setting it to false somewhere. So we have this. There's no need for this. Let's do this again. Okay, so we now have our second working. This means that our timeline is currently functional. The last thing we need to add to the player is the player controls. So that would be our last work on this player. So to do that, let's start with the pause and play. I'm going to bring in two icons for the play and pause, and these two icons we would now use them to implement play pause. So I'm just going to paste them here. So we have the pause. This is the pause icon, and this is the play icon. So inside our player, we're just going to import those icons and render them in. So let's go back to our player controls. So we have here, so this is our timeline, and we're now going to have controls, and beneath this we would have a container. Okay, now we have PlayPause added. Next thing is we're going to add the elapsed time, and to do that we would need to create a component for elapsed time. So I'm just going to also add that component, and okay, so we have, this is our component for elapsed time. We are expecting two properties to come in, and those two properties is the elapsed time in second and the total duration in second. So we have here, we'll now derive the elapsed time in minutes and the elapsed time in second, and then we would now make that create a ratio of minutes to seconds. Yeah, so let's go ahead and import that within our player. So inside player, just below the button, I'm going to render the elapsed time tracker, and we need the elapsed time in seconds, we need the elapsed time in seconds and the duration in seconds as well. So we're going to have to create two states for those. So let's have two states. These two states should have default value of 0, and we're going to be updating these states within the onTimeUpdate function. So we're going to get the set duration in sec and set elapsed time in sec, and this gets our elapsed and duration times in seconds. Let's see that. Yep, so this is our time tracker here. Now the last part of this player, the last thing to wrap things up, is to add the playback speed or playback rate. So we're going to need a component for that as well. Just going to add that here inside our source folder, and this is what the playback rate component looks like. So the component expects two props, the click and the playback rate. Actually, this is the button component. The main playback component expects two props, the playback rate and the set playback rate. So this, I'm actually supposed to call this playback rate. Okay, so this component expects two props, the playback rate and the set playback rate. So this is a state function that sets the playback rate state to a certain value when the user selects, and we are going to be rendering just three options, 1, and we have 1, 1.5 and 2. So you're going to see how this component will look like when I render it in the player controls. So we have here, this is where we are setting the playback rate. When the user clicks, I get the rate from this array, and I'm setting it to a state. And so we just have a hover state, background, and focus state. So let's go ahead and render that within the player. So inside our player, and just outside of this flex, we're going to have playback rate component rendered, and I'm going to create a state for the playback rate. Now let's go and pass these two props here. So we now have a playback rate component rendered, but as of now it is not doing anything. So we just have it. So even if I select it, value, nothing, no speed increase and nothing. So we need to get that to work by adding another new use effect. So adding separate use effect for that. So we just have to come below this one, and we're going to have use effect. And inside this use effect, I'm going to first of all check that the video ref is defined. And check again if video ref.current.playback rate is equal to playback rate then void, otherwise video ref current.playback rate. So this is where we're now setting the playback rate, and pass this here. Okay, this should have a playback rate working. So let's increase playback rate to 1.5x. Notice that time tracker updates faster. Okay, so yeah, so this is the video player, and let me just have a quick recap. So we've added the timeline with buffering and playback progress. We've also added playback speed increase, decrease, and we have the time tracker and pause play. So we can this is a very simple video player. I think you can make more improvements if you want. The source code, I'm going to add the source code link to the description. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you will find this helpful. If you do, please don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to like.